My name is Norm Finkelstein, and I'm going to be teaching this class, but it's not really teaching, as people who've been in the class before know. It's just serious engagement with ideas, but everybody is an active participant. Nobody can evade participation, however shy or reclusive you might be, you will be engaged. And this particular class is devoted to my favorite book in political theory. It's John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. And as it happens, the topic is never untimely, but in this particular, or at this particular moment, it happens to be very timely, because with the new president of the U.S., he has, Mr. Trump, he has evoked a large amount of resistance and also a large amount of anger because people are fearful that the clock is being turned back. And as this fear makes itself felt, and it's a real fear, one should not fool oneself about that. It's a real fear that many achievements over the past several decades are going to be summarily reversed, as in what's called executive orders, which seem to be coming at us in rapid succession. But as I said, there's a component of anger, and one of the manifestations of that anger is that large numbers of students and others have committed themselves basically to trying to, I don't know if they would like that word, I'm not sure of another word, but trying to silence what they consider regressive and retrogressive speech. And there have been now two significant, or I should say newsworthy incidents. One at UC Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley, when this fellow named Milo, and I can never pronounce his last name. Anyone can pronounce it?
Yiannopoulos.
How?
Yiannopoulos.
Yiannopoulos? Okay, Milo Yiannopoulos was scheduled to speak, and he was blocked, barred by popular demonstrations from speaking. He became a martyr for about a week until it then transpired that he endorsed pedophilia, and then his stock rapidly plummeted, and like a true coward as he is, he then proceeded to give a news conference in which he denied having endorsed what he did. So his stock plummeted. However, we will at some point discuss whether he should have been allowed to speak, and indeed whether it was wrong even for the publishing house, my memory is it was Simon & Schuster, whether it was right or wrong for them to cancel his book contract because they didn't want to seem to be endorsing some version of pedophilia. And then, in about last week, we had another incident. You want to just click on to rein in protesters, because I don't know what I'm doing. These laptops always sound tricky. Yeah, I think. No, that was a different one. It was the one I had on the screen already, so maybe we just go back. It's going to come, that's it. And then at Middlebury College last week, there was another protest which got a wee bit more violent, and this was because Charles Murray, who was one of the co-authors with Richard Bernstein, who's since passed from the scene. Charles Murray and Richard Bernstein were co-authors of a book a good 15 years ago now, or maybe even 20, entitled The Bell Curve, which argued that African Americans are intellectually inferior by virtue of genetics to non-African Americans. And I am no great admirer, personally, of Murray, because there's an element, again, in my opinion, of cowardice. When the book came out, The Bell Curve, it was this huge sensation, and as they call it, controversial. And Murray claimed he was so surprised that in this very hefty volume, it must have run to about 500 pages with large numbers of tables at the end, which were indecipherable to anyone except a specialist in the field. I was so surprised at how people focused just on the part about African Americans. Of course, he was not surprised. They knew exactly what they were doing. And it was just this very disingenuous, which is the fancy word for dishonest, disingenuous feigning of shock and surprise. Well, as you can judge from the poster here, his reputation lives on, and he was not able to speak. And actually, the core of the class is going to be discussing that very issue, whether people like Milo Yiannopoulos and Charles Murray should be allowed to speak. That's going to come later in the class, but that basically sets the stage for what we're going to be doing here. We'll be discussing the merits or demerits of allowing points of view which many people feel extreme hostility, allowing them to speak. So that's the outline. Before we start talking about the book, I'd like each of you to introduce yourselves to the class. And we'll start with Albert, the physicist from Carnegie Mellon, who's currently taking some time off. And you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, actually, I had some issues mentally and emotionally, so that's actually sort of why I took time off. It's been actually a number of years now, just to do it. But yeah, So I got into politics a few years ago.
You know, I know somebody who did the same thing, had mental and emotional issues and got into politics. And he was elected president. It was unbelievable.
Oh, but Trump was like that for decades. That's it.
You're still hoping for recovery.
Yeah.
Well, let me just tell you, this class is going to be therapeutic. Once this class is over, you're going to be ready to face the world again. That's a promise, okay? And we'll see whether I am proven correct. Just follow my advice. I know many people who went through long periods of depression and were on all those antidepressants, the Respidol, this, I know the whole thing.
Well, it's not even like depression, it's kind of complicated. I don't want to
It's okay, I have office hours tomorrow, we'll talk at that. Next.
My name is Ethan. What do I do? I'm a software developer. I live kind of around here. So this is my second one of these classes. I did one kind of last semester, I guess. Last time. Yeah, I like that. So
You have a fan club.
I have a fan club, that's right.
He's very modest.
Star.
He's very modest. He was one of the 2 stars of our former class. Some people win Oscars, some win Emmys, some win Tonys. Ethan won a Normie.
That's right. That's my claim to fame.
Next.
My name is Michael. As Ethan's understood.
Very understudied.
Yeah, maybe a couple. Yeah. Actually, my wife and I are recent transport from the West Coast.
This is your wife?
This is my wife.
Oh, well, welcome.
Brought her this time.
He was absolutely faithful. The first class. If my memory is correct, you're a lawyer also.
Yeah, I came to hijack your introduction.
Well, you've already hijacked his life. You might as well hijack his too. Okay, so you're now in legal aid,
Yeah.
and you look much better. That was a bad period. No, he was unemployed. Unemployment is the worst thing that can happen to a human being. Not knowing what to do when you get up in the morning.
Very much so. I am grateful.
You like it?
Yeah, so far.
Good. Good. Now, will you eventually go to law school, or it's
That's kind of cool, yeah.
yeah, good. And now you?
I'm Andrea. The Fortran enabled me to relive my college nightmare, the fatal first day, so apologies. As Michael said, we recently moved here about 6 months ago from the Seattle area, and I'm an attorney working for the ACLU, not the First Amendment department, so I'm coming at this from a place of not much knowledge about the First Amendment, but I'm really interested in it. I work on criminal law reform issues.
Uh-huh. Well, this is a good mix, because as the introduction to the class, as I posted it, or as the library posted it, there are 2 tendencies on what's called the left. One is the no free speech for fascists, of which these demonstrations are illustrative, but there's a second tradition, a competing tradition, which is the ACLU one, which is sometimes it's called First Amendment fundamentalists, which is free speech for everybody, including fascists. And those 2 tendencies coexist on the left, or what you call progressive. In my youth, I was on this side, and after I fell victim to people censoring unwanted ideas, I switched to that side. So they will both be represented in the class. Next.
I'm Barbara. I'm live in Park Slope, I work in Midtown Manhattan in economic development. And I'm empty nested, and what else?
Well, and that's the you found a new family. A large number of people here who are desperately in need of parental guidance and support.
I'm your gal.
Okay, Tori? Yeah. Go to.
My name is Cecilia. I'm a paralegal, and I live in the neighborhood. I'm trying to get rid of my son off this college.
And which college is he going to go to?
He wants to get away from me.
Well, that's normal.
So,
Well, then let him go. Where do you live? You live in Manhattan?
I'll live across the street.
Oh, okay. So he can go to Queens College. That was a joke. Instead of Brooklyn College. Okay, and I saw Celia on January 1st at Coney Island. I was going into the water for the polar bear day, and Cecilia exhorted me to go in because she wanted to have that picture of me dying for Facebook. Finkelstein dead. She thought she could get $1,000 on eBay. And I'm sorry to have disappointed you.
Next day.
Next.
Hi, I'm Johara. I'm a student, and I live around here as well.
Where are you a student?
I'm a community college student. And
Which one?
So I go to Kingsborough.
That's near me. I live down by Coney Island.
Yeah.
So you just started?
Yes, I just started at Kingsborough, but I'm from the Bay Area. So
Excuse me?
I'm from the Bay Area,
Where did you go to high school?
Berkeley High School.
Which one?
Berkeley High.
Berkeley.
Hi.
Berkeley.
Where is Berkeley
The
High?
Bay Area.
In the Bay
It's
Area.
like a block away from UC Berkeley.
So how did you end up here?
I decided to come out here.
Oh my God, you definitely need Barbara. That's a long way from home. You miss your parents? Do you Skype every day? Yeah, that's a long way. I have friends in Berkeley.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to make you feel at home. Can anyone do one round of if you're going to San Francisco? Make sure you have a flower in your hair. You know that song? No? Who knows that song?
It's an old 60s.
Of course. I would like to bring that up. We'll do that during. Just remember, if you're going to San Francisco, make sure you have a flower in your hair. It's a beautiful song. The guy just passed away who wrote it, or sang it. Okay, but we're going to bring the 60s back in this class. Next.
I am Lee Saab. I'm a software architect at IBM. I'm specialized in cloud and cognitive solutions. Cognitive means artificial intelligence combined with analyzing a large amount of data. In simple words, this is the commercial spying software. This is where they analyze all Facebook tweets and all these things and try to make sense out of it.
It's Big Brother.
Don't be nervous.
Yeah.
Big Brother.
He drove me home when I was lecturing at Princeton. He's Muslim, that means he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
If there were more people like him in this world, we wouldn't need Amtrak anymore.
I'm originally from Egypt, Southern, so it's a very conservative community. I served in the Egyptian army and then I went to technology. And I came here like 5 years ago. Moved from IB in Egypt to IB in the US. And I've been there since then. I live in New Jersey, so almost down here.
And remind me of your name?
Java.
What is it?
Joker.
Spell it.
JAWHARRH.
Jawar. If Jawar, you want to go home tomorrow to San Francisco, he'll drive you. He's a nice guy. Unusually so. Next, this is our representative of Bensonhurst Bay Ridge.
It's a good guess, Flatbush, actually.
Flatbush.
Yeah.
No, it's not the same. But
Adjacent, but I did grow up in Flatbush. My name is Jacob. I work in the library during the day. I'm a freelance writer, and so typically I'm posted up on the 3rd floor, which is how I found out about the class. I am interested in the subject for personal and professional reasons.
he wrote me and told me he hated me. And I said, okay, come to the class. Okay. I don't discriminate.
It's not quite.
That's what I would
Very close.
Where did you go to high school?
Bronx House,
From some good school, college,
Boston University,
good school. I know that. What was your major?
International Relations.
Okay. I don't think I know you in international relations there. Did you know Nina Silver in history?
That name sounds familiar, not that I recall.
Okay. Welcome. And who are you?
My name's Liam. I live nearby in the neighborhood. Originally from Chicago, been here about 5 years.
We're in Chicago, that hideous city.
Orange.
North side of the city. Edgewater.
I have no idea why the settlers, as they were moving west, they stopped at Chicago. No, really. It's a complete enigma to me. It's like stopping in a morass. Never seen one. And by the way, Bertrand Russell said the same thing in his autobiography. An absolutely hideous city. I mean, people in Chicago think like this is the greatest city on earth. Really, it's been
Summertime is pretty nice.
Actually, I was never there in the summer. I couldn't wait to get out when the semester was over. Until I got out forever. Which is a subject of Broadway Canard.
Well, yeah, I mean, I came across like your lectures and debates on YouTube maybe a few years ago, and just got really interested in, yeah, very much, and that's something.
And what do you do here?
I work in hospitality, like as a barista in a cafe, hopefully open one. What's that?
You're gonna open up a cafe?
I mean, that's I hope to down the road, but right now I work as at a cafe like South Brooklyn.
South.
Like South Slope, I guess 6th and 19th Street.
And what do you do?
Like a barista, kind of work at the cafe and, run the place.
Well, now we have a place to hang out. As in free. And who are you?
My name is Elise. I'm from Midtown, Manhattan. I live in Harlem. And I'm here in part in response to the anger you were discussing earlier, and in part because of him. And we
Are you an item?
We are.
I figured that. We have 2 couples in the class. It's very romantic. The borders on sickening. Okay, and what do you do?
What I do professionally has no bearing on who I am as a person. I'm a secretary.
It's okay. It's dignified labor, and it's definitely
It is.
preferable to being unemployed or being a parasite,
I
of
concur.
which there are a large number in our society.
It pays the bills, although I am serious and it's very little to do with who I am as a person. So perhaps if there's enough time, we will learn more about that.
We will discover the real you. The to the units
Crushed by society?
trying to come out. Firstly. And we have, introduce yourself, you're now a mainstay of the class.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tori. I work for Brooklyn Public Library as an intern here. From Long Island, live in Brooklyn, go to school in the city, work in Jersey.
And between the time we last saw him and today, he lost 30 pounds.
That's a lie, I lost 15.
Did you have to use the word lie?
They distant.
I would say exaggeration.
Yes, sort of something that Trump does.
Yeah. No, he lies.
It's an alternate fact.
But actually, I'm actually, I'm mixed feeling about that, because I feel that Trump's lies are vulgar, they're stupid, and they're easily disproved. But I do think the mainstream media, I agree with Trump, they lie all the time, but it's just much more sophisticated lies. During the last month of the presidential election, we were being told every day how great the economy is. That Obama gave us full employment, that he turned the whole economy around. And people like Paul Krugman, the Times Nobel laureate economist, day in and day out, about how Obama reduced inequality, ended unemployment. Now, I thought that was a much bigger lie than anything Trump said. It's a more sophisticated lie, but for all the young people in our country who are unemployed or who are scraping by on free idiotic jobs called gigs, who can't pay any bills, who can't move out of their parents' home, who are living in the basement, for them to have to hear the economy is great, there's no unemployment, I think that's a much bigger lie. So I find Trump's lies, they're kind of stupid, I'll agree, and they're easily disproved, but I don't think they do nearly as much damage as the lies in the mainstream media.
And also like a lot of his lies, like they're factually untrue, but it has a greater truth that matters to people's lives. Like for example, like he might say some lie about Obamacare and like a degree tuition, like it increases your premiums, and then there will be a fact checks in the mainstream media. Oh, he's lying. Like he greatly exaggerated, but at the same time, it reaches truth to people's lives.
I totally agree. For those of you who are interested, there was a very excellent debate of an extraordinarily high quality, I felt, between Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz on Obamacare. And one of the things that made the debate of such high quality was, even though Bernie was there to defend Obamacare, he didn't lie. On the issue of premiums, Ted Cruz said, Obama said premiums would go down by $2,500 under Obamacare. In fact, they doubled. And Bernie did not deny it. So I totally agree that there's a kernel of truth in a lot of what Trump says, and it doesn't do anyone any service to pretend as if everything he's saying is untrue. And that's one of the things we'll be discussing in the class. There's an expression in English, a broken clock is right twice a day. And amidst all the lies, there's a number of truths. And I think if we want to have a serious debate about the direction of our country, we have to also acknowledge what that he is saying is true. I totally agree. A lot of people who are listening to the debate on Obamacare, and they're saying that's not true. Our premiums went down. They're going through the ceiling, those premiums in Obamacare. And at one point, Ted Cruz said the insurance companies, they had $10 billion in profits in 2010. After Obamacare, their profits went up to $15 billion. But they were the real beneficiaries. And Bernie said, it's true. I've always said we have to get insurance companies out of this. So it was a very interesting debate because it was a very high level of factual argument and counter-argument combined with an unusually high level of absolute honesty. So it's recommended. Okay, having said that, we're going to now turn to On Liberty. Let me just make a small recommendation as we proceed in the semester, or yes, it is basically the semester. And the recommendation is this. We will be shifting classrooms, but there won't be an absolute guarantee that every week we're going to have these wonderful facilities. I'm using a version of Mills on Liberty that's on the web. So if it's not too much trouble, maybe try to think about half of you bringing your laptops. So just in case we are deprived of these facilities, we can use the laptop. And that basically means you two can coordinate, and just the other people between you just make an agreement among yourselves who will bring you the laptop each week so you can just share it. If you can remember that, that will simplify matters for us. So, Mills on Liberty is one of those classics of political theory. In Mills, Mill was a first-rank thinker of the 19th century, and he's impressive in many regards. The one that most makes itself felt on the reader is the moral seriousness with which he engages a question. These are serious issues for him. One of the things that I personally find unsympathetic in the case of, say, Milo Yiannopoulos is that he seems to invest more time in his wardrobe than he does in his preparation to discuss a serious topic. And that cannot be said of Mill. Mill was the godfather of Bertrand Russell, and just like Mill, Russell, or Chomsky, Professor Noam Chomsky, whatever question you're asked to engage in, you never get a trivial response, you never get a conventional response. It's always original, it brings to bear vast erudition, and it's always serious. Some of you might know the, what's that comedian's name, Borat?
Borat.
Borat, right.
You know what?
And there's an episode of Borat where he's interviewing Chomsky, and it was very revealing that, because Professor Chomsky was completely oblivious to the fact that this was a stunt. Each question that was put to him, he tried to answer with seriousness, not realizing it was a joke. But that's the kind of person Mill was. And so you're going to have a erudite and a serious engagement with the issue at hand, namely the question of liberty. And what essentially the book is about is quite straightforward, and in its essence, though not in its details, in its essence, it's pretty a straightforward issue. And the issue is, how far are you as an individual entitled to liberty, liberty having two components, which I'll get to in a moment, liberty of speech and liberty of conduct, or liberty of action. How far are you allowed to pursue your right to liberty of liberty before the government has the right to step in and to say, this far and no further? Once you cross a certain red line, so to speak, or if you cross a certain red line, at that point the government has the right to put curbs or restrictions on your liberty. And the reverse is equally true. How far can the government restrict or curb your liberty before you're allowed to say, that far but no further? You are now violating my right to liberty, and you now have gone too far. So basically, the On Liberty is about, in part, it's about drawing lines. How far are you allowed to go before the government has the right to step in and curb or restrict your liberty? And how far can the government go before you have the right to step in and say, no, you've now gone too far? That's one side of On Liberty. The other side of On Liberty is, it's a very elegant disquisition, an elegant essay on why liberty is useful. As we'll see later in the class, Mill does not make the kind of argument which he calls a natural rights argument, the kind of argument that says, I have the right to say what I want because that's my God-given right, and you have no right to tell me what to do. It's a right that you are endowed with by the Creator. He's not interested in that kind of argument. He's interested in what he calls a utilitarian argument, an argument about usefulness. He wants to show that liberty of speech and liberty of conduct, they are useful. They are useful to each of us as individuals, but they're also useful to society as a whole. He wants to show that as much as letting Mr. Yiannopoulos and letting Mr. Murray speak, as much as you find their ideas appalling, regressive, obnoxious, as much as you might recoil in disgust at their ideas, he's going to say, nonetheless, notwithstanding, nevertheless, it's useful to let them speak. That's going to be the burden of his essay, to prove that these kinds of speech and kinds of conduct that you find appalling, regressive, obnoxious, that kinds of conduct that you might be appalled by, it nonetheless is useful to let people participate in what he calls these experiments in living. The book is basically divided into two parts. Chapters 1 and 2, let me just check. Chapters 1 and 2 are basically devoted to liberty of speech, what you should and shouldn't be allowed to say. And here, Mill tends to be on the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU First Amendment fundamentalist side, with only one relatively minor exception. Mill is everything goes. He doesn't put any restrictions or limits on freedom of speech. The last three chapters are much more complicated, and in my opinion, for what it's worth, not nearly as successfully worked through. The last three chapters are on liberty of conduct, and it ought to be perfectly obvious that issues arise with liberty of conduct which are very different from liberty of speech. So to take an obvious example, if Ethan were to stand outside this classroom and distribute leaflets saying, "Long live nudity," nobody would have any problem with the distribution of those leaflets. It's freedom of speech. He shouldn't have any curbs or restrictions placed on him. However, if we cross the line from liberty of speech to liberty of conduct, and Ethan were to come to class stark naked, well, simply on aesthetic grounds, we would have reason to curb his conduct. You're blushing.
I bet you look lovely under all this.
Excuse me?
I said, I bet you look lovely under all this clothes.
Calm down, your boyfriend is here. But that was very sweet of you. Extremely dishonest. So, obviously, the liberty of conduct raises much more complex questions. And as I said, in general, I don't think that Mill successfully tackles them, not because it was an inferior attempt. It's just I don't think there are answers. And that's what we're going to be looking at. I simply don't believe that there are answers to most of the questions that liberty of conduct raises. But at least he raises the questions, which is what's most important. And then we can tackle trying to figure out answers, although maybe there aren't any, which is my opinion for what it's worth. So that's basically the outline. we'll spend about half of the class, half of the semester, 4 weeks on liberty of speech. How many weeks is this? Is it 10 or 8? 10. Then we'll do about 5 weeks on liberty of speech and 5 weeks on liberty of conduct. You'll see it's very full. It's a very rich text, and you'll find a lot that's useful in it. Now, would you like, just for a moment, would you like to be in charge of the search, or would you like me to appoint someone? It's up to you.
You should have someone.
Okay. Albert, because you're the physicist. Well, actually, we have 2 software people here. So I'm gonna, this may be like an inferior exercise for you. So Ethan, how would you like to come here? It's going to be a very simple task. All I'm going to say is, because I have to find relevant passages to read, so I'll just say do a search, the keyword. I'll give you the keyword, and then you'll just find it. Okay? If you don't mind, please remain clothed as you do this exercise.
My son and I, we had that same discussion before I came here. I was asking him to get me my pants, and he was like, "Why do you need your pants? Go ahead."
I think it's time for your son to move out. Talking to his own mother that way. The first question that Mill wants to engage is a preliminary question. He has to ask himself, okay, we live in a democracy, we live in 19th century England. Why do we have to even worry ourselves about the problem of liberty? After all, a democracy means self-government. It means the power of the people over themselves. That's what liberty is. So why do we have to be vigilant about encroachments on personal liberty in a democracy? That's the first question he asks himself. Who would like to suggest for the class, why is it that we have to, even in our own society, leaving aside for a moment the possibilities of, say, a constitutional coup or the state declaring an emergency and outright curbing our liberty, which I think is pretty remote, unless there is a quote-unquote terrorist attack. But short of that, I think it's pretty remote. But why do we have to worry, even in democracy, on the problem of liberty being encroached upon? Anybody want to suggest an answer? Okay, you're gonna have to remind me of your names.
Andrea.
Andrea?
So I think even absent those extreme instances that you cited, we can see examples of the people electing or having appointed someone into a position of power, specifically legislators, and they might act in a way that the people don't understand is going to encroach on their liberty. For example, like passing a bill that increases sanctions for protest. And the people have less of a bargaining chip to be aware of that as happening.
I think Andrea cribbed my notes. You got the first point exactly right. That's never happened. It's another reason why I'm beginning to believe in a cosmic force. So if you would go to start at the beginning, Ethan, it's going to be pretty much sequential. So go to the very beginning, just put the cursor at the beginning, and then look for the word exercise. Search for exercise. Keep going, try again. No, keep going.
We do 2 words at once.
Yeah, what's the other more words?
Oh, you're correct. Exercise the power. Oh no, maybe I. No, I do have
The
it.
people who exercise
Okay.
the power, that one?
Yes. The way we usually do it is trying to highlight that passage, go from there to exercise in the next line. Good. And would you mind reading it for us, Andrea, since you were the one who, in a brilliant display of clairvoyance, came up with that?
Sure. The people who exercise the power are not always the same people with those over whom it is exercised.
The people who exercise the power are not always the same people with those over whom it is exercised. That even though a democracy says, a democracy by definition is self-government, the power of the people over themselves, but there's always the danger in a representative democracy that the people who are representing us end up representing themselves. And there is an encroachment on our liberty at our expense and to their benefit. Who would like to suggest another reason why we have to be ever vigilant, cautious in a democracy? Anyone want to try? Yes?
Kind of like commonly held beliefs might be wrong, right? And if you just restrict people from saying things that are controversial, then you'll never be able to realize that it's wrong, right?
But this is a preliminary question. That's going to come a little bit later. What is it about the nature of a democracy that may encroach on our liberty? Let's start by go to most numerous. Okay. Let's see how far we want to go. Let's go to oppress a part of their number. Good, very good. Would you like to read for us, Jacob?
Yes, the will of the people, moreover, practically means the will of the most numerous or the most active part of the people, the majority.
And now skip a little to the people.
Except it was the people consequently may desire to oppress a part of their number.
Okay. So let me just, I should make some statements. I want to just check with the cameraman. How is the sound? We're okay. Okay, because we're going to try to get it right from the first day. So the sound is working fine. The will of the people practically means the will of the most numerous, or the most active part of the people, the majority. The people consequently may desire to oppress a part of their number. What is he trying, what's the expression we use?
Tyranny, majority.
Good. He's referring to, as Cecilia and Jacob said, the problem of the tyranny of the majority. It's typical of a democracy that in most, though not all areas, you have majority rule. Obviously, in our own society, there are certain protections for individuals written into our system, but in general, it's the principle of majority rule, and there's always the danger that the majority will end up tyrannizing, even in a democracy, tyrannizing the minority. So those are the two common forms that the threats posed in a democracy to liberty. But for Mill, they're not the main ones. The main concern that Mill has is not the tyranny of the majority so much as the tyranny of public opinion. the tyranny that results from people being fearful of clashing, conflicting with, fearful of being held in contempt and derision by public opinion. It's not for Mill so much political tyranny that he's worried about as it is social tyranny. So we go to penetrating more deeply. Okay, he writes, maybe we'll start from society can and does, and we'll go to the soul. Let's see. Social penetrating more deeply and enslaving.
Enslaving the soul itself.
Yeah. So we have Andrea. Let's have Barbara read it to the class.
Society can and does execute its own mandates. And if it issues wrong mandates instead of right, or any mandates at all, and things which it ought not to meddle, it practices a social tyranny more formidable than many kinds of political oppression. Since though not usually upheld by such extreme penalties, it leaves fewer means of escape, penetrating much more deeply into the details of life and enslaving the soul itself.
So he says the problem is that society practices not a kind of legal tyranny where, for example, you end up in jail for doing something that is unorthodox or unconventional or iconoclastic. It's not that you end up in jail. That's not the problem. The problem is that you become fearful of saying things or doing things which offend public opinion. It's a social tyranny more formidable than many kinds of political oppression. It's worse than the oppression of ending up even in jail, or lesser so, having to pay certain kinds of fines. Why? Since, though not usually upheld by such extreme penalties, jail, even torture, it leaves fewer means of escape. This social tyranny leaves fewer means of escape, penetrating more deeply into the details of life and enslaving the soul itself. And now read the next sentence. I know the letters, but I can't get them all together. Joie. Correct? No. I would like to get it right, so just give it to me again.
Jauhara.
Jauhara.
Yes.
It's jewelry in English.
It's what?
Jewelry. You know the jewelry?
Oh, jewelry.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to call you jewelry.
That's not really the meaning.
Do you have a nickname? Because my brain just won't do it. I know it. I know myself.
Hara.
Hara. That's good.
Usually, I don't have anyone call me that. Just Johanna.
Jahara. Jahara.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just like Johanna, but instead of two N's, two R's. Yeah.
Jahara.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll call you Beyonce. Jahara. Okay. Read protection.
Protection, therefore, against the tyranny of the magistrate is not enough.
Just for clarification, Middle can be quite difficult, and I want everybody to feel part. So if you of the class. So if you know, forgive me, but I will be saying things to enable everybody to understand. Magistrate in this context means what? What?
The law.
Yeah, the legislature, the lawgiver. Go ahead. The person who writes the laws. Yes.
There needs protection also against the tyranny of the prevailing opinion and feeling, against the tendency of society to impose, by other means than civil penalties, its own ideas and practices as rules of conduct on those who dissent from them.
Good. That's fine. Protection, therefore, against the tyranny of the magistrate is not enough. It's not enough to focus simply on the legislation and execution of laws. If you want to protect your liberty, it's insufficient to focus only, or even for Mill, primarily, to focus on the law. Protection, therefore, against the tyranny of the magistrate is not enough. There needs protection also against the tyranny of the prevailing opinion and feeling. Notice the terms he's using. The bigger enemy is prevailing opinion, and this nebulous thing, nebulous means sort of like impalpable. It's there, but you can't really touch it, feel it. This thing called prevailing opinion and feeling against the tendency of a society to impose by other means than civil penalties its own ideas and practices as rules of conduct on those who dissent from them. Okay, let's just take a pause here for a moment and to ask the question, which is a very pertinent one, I think, in the situation we're currently passing through in the United States. There does seem to be a real danger now being posed by the magistrate or law. These executive orders that we're being bombarded with each day in such rapidity, one barely knows what to focus on. Where should we be directing our energies? And there seems to be a real problem with the cabinet positions being awarded to persons who are not just billionaires, but whose set goal and intention is to dismantle the cabinet positions which they have been appointed to. Head of the Environmental Protection Agency, who in effect wants to dismantle the EPA, the head of the Department of Education, who in effect wants to dismantle public education, and it's across the board. Let's ask a serious question. What is the danger? What is the bigger danger posed now in our society? Is it the tyranny of the magistrate, or is it the danger posed by the tyranny of prevailing opinion and feeling, the fear in the hearts of dissenters with, let's call it, thin skin, who are fearful of facing the wrath, not of the law, but the wrath of public opinion and feeling. And it's useful, I think, to focus on Mill is a master of the English language. His control of the English language is actually terrifying, as we'll discover later on. The sentences are just works of art, they are. But he uses here a kind of, it's not a precise word, and I think he's using it for a reason, because that's the nature of the danger. He's using this word, the tyranny of feeling and opinion. Which is the bigger danger confronting us now? Would anyone like to venture an opinion of his or her own? What is the bigger danger facing us now?
I don't think the executive orders themselves.
Gotta talk about it.
I don't think the executive orders themselves are posing the threat. I think the bigger problem is there is quite a lot of people who are receptive and okay with those orders. This, for me, this is scary. Not Trump or any other president wouldn't dare doing that if he didn't know that people would be okay with it.
So, the point, remind me of your name? Waleed. The point Waleed makes is the danger is not so much the laws themselves as the widespread public receptivity to them. Anyone else? Mr. Jacob? What is, in your view, you have a large amount of life experience already. I take it you're in your mid-20s?
No, I'm mid-30s.
Mid-30s. So you have even a larger amount of life experience than I assume. As you experience life in our society, what do you find a bigger problem? Is it tyrannical or potentially tyrannical laws, or is it a tyranny of public opinion and feeling such that people are afraid to express what they believe? I'll give you one example, and then you can say your piece. I was very struck during the presidential election that if you walked around and talked to people, nobody said they supported Trump. Nobody said it. And then after the election, I remember I had to get my bicycle repaired. I go into the bicycle repair shop, and I got to talking about the election. And the fellow who was repairing the bicycle was, by the way, he's in the island of Jamaica, lives in Staten Island. He said he supported Trump. And then another person came in, and he said, another worker in that bicycle repair shop, he said he supported Trump. And then suddenly I was, there are a lot of people around us that supported Trump, but they were afraid to say it. There was no law that prevented you from saying it, but there was a kind of, can we call it tyranny of political correctness? that people were afraid to say what they felt. I think that was a very big problem, actually. Because if people are afraid to say what they think, you can't engage with them and try to persuade them that maybe they're wrong. Because people are afraid to express their opinion. And there are people here who are, not many as it is, but I do think there is a problem on college campuses with the tyranny of opinion and feeling when it comes to certain topics. There's no law on campus, you can't say this or you can't say that, but there's certainly a lot of feeling that it's politically incorrect and you can't say it, and I think that is a big problem. Now, what is your estimate? Do you think Mill is right that in many respects it poses as great, if not even a greater problem? He uses that nice expression, it penetrates more deeply into the details of life and enslaving the soul itself.
I think that in a democracy, if the government gets too far away from popular opinion and finds itself accountable to the next election, some sort of instrument of accountability. So if that has been the idea so far. So I would say for most of my adult lifetime, when I've really been thinking about this, the bigger problem was the tyranny of public sentiment, that was day to day. What was the bigger constraint on what people spoke about? People I interacted with didn't have any fears about government intrusion. I do think they had fears about social stigma, etc. We may be at a kind of inflection point for that now, but I guess that remains to be seen. It seems to me like maybe there's a kind of overcorrection happening now that may, in part due to this anti-political correctness stuff, empower a government that has certain, say, authoritarian inclinations, and so maybe that's changing, but for my lifetime, it has not been the government that people feared censure from.
Well, I think that's an interesting answer. He's basically what Jacob said was, if you look at things from a day-to-day level, interactions with your fellow students, fellow workers, friends, community, he says that it's more, the expression Jacob used was, it's more the fear of a social stigma than fear of government retaliation that inhibits speech and inhibits people's expression of their beliefs. And he then said, it's pretty rarely the case that people in our society curb what they say because, that may get me on a list. But that does happen now. I mean, we should be clear about that. People are a lot more cautious about what they say in the phone and what they write because they think, everything is tapped and everyone is watching you. So there is a lot more, I think, my impression is, a lot more caution than there has been in the past, especially after the revelations with Snowden, and you discover how much the government has penetrated certain of your most personal precincts in life. But in general, Jacob says, if you look at people's, say, day-to-day conversation, in your day-to-day conversation, it's not, oh, I better not say that because the government might be listening in while he maybe has a program. No, mostly it's the fear of a social stigma, the fear of coming head to head with public opinion and feeling. That's the main inhibitor. What do you say? Your name again?
Liam.
Liam.
Liam, yeah.
Like Liam, the actor, Liam
Yes.
Neeson. I'll remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, in terms of the prevailing opinion thing, that's certainly more prevalent in today's, I think, than the magistrate. We're just so divided as a country that this election, I think, turned into really what the definition of American is, and people holding on to an old definition. And this election brought a lot of that ugliness out, and I feel like people wanted to be seen either on one side or the other. And the side that won was like pretty ugly, and I guess that was the whole thing. We mentioned like the silent majority. A lot of people got a sick thrill out of what Trump was saying, but they didn't want to admit it.
So did they get a lot of
A lot of people got kind of like a sick thrill out of what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
A certain amount of people, but they didn't want to admit that because they kind of knew it was wrong.
Let me just, I want to get to you in a moment, Albert, but you now posed another question which we'll have lots of time to discuss, but it seems to be pertinent already at this point. Mill says that there is a tyranny of public opinion which can enslave the soul itself, and he makes this tyranny of public opinion out to be, at least in this passage, he makes it out to be a wholly negative phenomenon, enslaving the soul. But how about the tyranny of public opinion, which is not so much a enslavement of the soul, but it's a, if I can use the expression, it's a civilizing instrument, this public opinion and feeling. That is to say, we don't say things anymore that we used to because they're really offensive to people. And we're afraid to say it because people will think you are you're kind of a barbarian. Like, we don't make jokes anymore about people who have handicaps, which we did in my day. We had a whole slew of what were called Helen Keller jokes. We don't make fun of people who are, so to speak, different. And that is, in some ways, yes, I would call it a tyranny of public opinion and feeling, but I would also say it's a civilizing instrument. It doesn't so much enslave the soul, it puts curbs on gross, vulgar, inconsiderate, stupid behavior and speech. And maybe that's a good thing. Albert, you wanted to say something a few moments ago.
He commented that Trump supporters get like a thrill.
A sick thrill, he called it.
I'm quite sure some of them get it from that, but I think it's far from monolithic. And what I kind of understood from engaging with a lot of people is that on their politics is that when they support like a certain policy or a politician or ideology, you sort of think of it in sort of general abstractions and don't actually like take it through to the logical conclusion. So there might be like some features that they admire in Trump that are actually, I think, we would actually be sympathetic with, but there's a lot of self-deception on the parts that they would actually normally disagree with, because you become attracted to those particular features. They end up actually.
Can you give one concrete example of what you have in mind?
I mean, for example, like Trump, they would describe Trump as anti-establishment, and the difference between him and Hillary is that Trump actually goes out to the public and talks to the people. That's what a lot of Trump supporters do. But then when you bring up matters about like Goldman Sachs appointments, and like that's a major thing that they always criticize Hillary for. Oh, they apply like double standards, and when you bring it up to Trump support about the Goldman Sachs appointment, they always come up with excuses, even though they always criticize Hillary for it. So, and this goes for like Hillary supporters too. There's a lot of, like, you shouldn't assume that like when someone supports like ideology that they actually have all the sets of assumptions that are underneath it. Like when they support Trump, it's not necessarily that they support everything for what Trump is, at least thoroughly. It's more like they support Trump in the abstract, and then a lot of self-deception is imposed on the parts that they would normally find disagreeable. That's basically my observation.
By the way, I have to be a little bit, thank you. And I think that's right. I think that to lump all of Trump's supporters into what Hillary Clinton called the basket of deplorables was very off base. And well, I can give many examples, but I don't want to digress right now. I have to be careful of a working assumption here, which is the assumption that everybody here opposes Trump. And we should be careful about that. So if you want to express your opinion, don't recoil because of the tyranny of public opinion and feeling in the class. Find the courage to be an open dissenter. And what was it? He said, and don't allow us to impose limits on your thinking. Yes? Excuse me?
A lot of eyes on me. No, I was just saying, a lot of people, they disagree with a lot of Trump's ideologies. There's one ideology that I'm really borderline with, and that's the travel ban. And the reason I say that is because there was a video in which one of our U.S. soldiers who's overseas right now fighting. He's fighting against ISIL. And he had made a video saying that, well, what happens if I come to your city and I walk around and the local city would be killed, would be shot? You know, they probably hang you up, they do bad things to you. And then he asked the simplest question in his terms. Well, why would I want to open my city to you? Oh, this is a great question.
Why would what?
Why would he want to open up his city to you then? If locals are going to kill me if I come to your city. If you're going to do the most horrible things to me. And so, you know, it did make me step back for a second and think about this. Yes, there are bad people in this world, but they're not just all overseas. There's bad people here in the United States. We have a large enough domestic terrorism issue, sovereign citizens style terrorism-related incidents. They all don't happen overseas.
I'm not going to engage that now because it's going to take us too far afield, but I'm glad you expressed the opinion.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to hear one more reaction. This is Liam's significant other.
Yes.
And you go by the name of?
Elise.
Elise.
Yes.
Do you think that there are certain forms of public and opinion and feeling which are tyrannical, but they're also, I think, kind of healthy
Wow.
for society?
Yes. Although I think the strength in opposition begins with, as you put it, the courage to dissent. So if there is a general public opinion that proves useful and beneficial in its tyranny, that is also limiting and oppressive in its functional action, the methods to engage in changing that and making that oppression more beneficial is not going to come from a group of people. It's going to come from one or two people who find the courage to speak out against those portions of that policy or whatever it is that do not serve society anymore. And these are the dangers of existing in a democratic, bipartisan society. It's too easy to fall into a category or another category, when in actuality, all of these categories
I have a little problem, and let's see how you respond to it. You use the word courage, and I know you're echoing me. I use that word also. But let's say this fellow Milo Yiannopoulos, he likes to praise himself. Actually, he likes to praise himself, period. But he likes to praise himself as having the courage to say things which are, I think even he would partly concede, are obnoxious. And he is dissenting. He calls it courage. And he is challenging prevailing opinion and feeling. Is that really courage to ridicule, mock, to reduce to tears people who are already being tormented by their situations? I personally had no sympathy. If you recall, there was these characters from a French magazine called Charlie Hebdo, and it made a point of mocking Muslims and mocking the Muslim religion and mocking Allah. And at some point, let's say they experienced the blowback and their place was demolished and several of them were killed. And people talked about how courageous they were, how they were challenging the tyranny of prevailing opinion and feeling which spoke to political correctness and not being Islamophobic. And so there were acclaim, including in the US by organizations like PEN, which gave them an award and so forth. They were being celebrated for defying public opinion and feeling, dissenting, and showing courage. I frankly was wholly, as I said, unsympathetic to that reaction when they were dispatched prematurely to their makers. Well, they were apparently atheists, so they wouldn't accept that formulation. Because I thought to myself, okay, I live in New York, and sometimes there are homeless people on the subway. And the homeless people, as you know, they often reek. because they haven't bathed themselves in a sustained period of time. And I remember once I was on the subway and some guys came on. It was just at the time of the first Gulf War, so we're talking about 1991, way before anyone in this room was born. They came into the subway, and there was a homeless person, and they said, he stinks, this guy stinks. I thought to myself, okay, he does reek, that's true, but he's already tormented. What are you doing, guys? And if that homeless person, if it didn't happen, but if he had taken a bottle in his hand, broken the bottle, and then went over to those guys and stabbed them with the bottle, even killing them, or one or two of them, dare I say on camera that I wouldn't feel sorry for them. I don't find that what they did particularly courageous. I don't think every dissent from the quote-unquote tyranny of the prevailing opinion and feeling is particularly courageous. I'm not going to cry even a single salty tear for folks like that. We have two people. We'll start with Jacob and then Andrea.
Yeah, I would say a few things in response to that. The first is that, just as a matter of public record, if you look at the cover of Charlie Hebdo, they spent far more time mocking Catholics than they did Muslims. So the characterization of Hebdo as a purely Muslim disparaging magazine is inaccurate.
Okay, I'm going to engage in the dialogue. I'm not stopping you. I don't do that. But I don't want to go to the next point before the first point. If somebody calls me a cracker, right, and even says many times I'm a cracker. For those of you who are unaware, cracker is it's the slang for like what they call white trash. Okay, somebody calls me a cracker. It just bounces off me. It's meaningless to me. Because as a white person, what do I care if somebody calls me a cracker? Now, if you take the equivalent, the N-word for an African American, it has a very different impact. Now, yes, they may have mocked Catholics, but when you're a dominant group in society, it doesn't mean anything. You just laugh it off, like if somebody calls me a cracker. I was talking about mocking people who are already tormented.
These assertions all serve your initial point, which is that there
Wait,
is...
I want to just let him finish, because I promise I won't cut him off.
Yeah, just be that as it may, I don't accept the premise, but even if I did, just as a matter of record, they spent far more time mocking Catholics. They also mocked Jews. They were
I don't think that's
radical 68 years.
I don't think that's accurate, but I'm not going to...
There's a breakdown of all the covers. And
I read quite a lot about the Charlie Hebdo.
As a separate point, though, about what constitutes courage in dissent.
Yes.
In your analogy, I mean, I would have to point out that the suggestion is that Europe's Muslims or France's Muslim population.
Round your attention, please. Central Library will be closing in 15 minutes. If you have any reference materials to return, please do so at this time. If you would like to check out any materials, please join the checkout line now. I repeat, Central Library will be closing in 15 minutes.
Go ahead.
The analogies between, I believe, France's Muslim population and a mentally disturbed homeless person on a train.
I'm not sure they're mentally disturbed.
Oh, a homeless person on a train. I think part of what goes into the equation for courage involves the prospect of retribution. Or, as I think implicitly you're arguing, a power dynamic. And if you know that there's a chance of physical violence in return for your speech, as the Hebdo people certainly did since they've been attacked before, that should go into what constitutes courage to attack, even to mock or disparage a random homeless person on the train, where you believe that all of the power is on your side. I think it's despicable, obviously. But the analogy falls apart because, in this case, is the fact that they, along with the security guards who were working there, were killed, as other cartoonists had been attacked prior to that, suggests that they knew that there were possible repercussions for their actions, and they decided that what they wanted to say, however scandalous we may find it, they decided that what they had to say was worth saying, regardless of those consequences, which they knew firsthand because they'd been attacked before.
I hear every word you're saying. And basically, as I understand it, Jacob is saying that physical courage is courage regardless of the cause that it might happen to be serving. Even if it's serving a iniquitous cause, if they show courage, it's courage. I don't really agree with that. I understand what you're saying, but I personally don't believe that an act like courage or a descriptive like courage can be separated from the cause that it's serving. So I'll give you an extreme example, and I recognize that extreme examples often aren't the best ones, but nonetheless I'll use it for illustrative purposes and hear you out. Let's say you're World War II, end of World War II, the Red Army, the Allied armies, they're advancing, they're now approaching a death camp, and some guard in the death camp, they're all fleeing now. The guards are fleeing, the Red Army is coming, they're fleeing for their life. Some Nazi soldier totally believes in what the cause, believes in the Fuhrer, believes in the Third Reich, believes in all the details. He or she, notwithstanding the fact that all the other concentration camp guards fled, he or she stays at his or her post to defend the cause. Okay? Is that courage to defend the fact that the gas chambers continue functioning and the crematoria keep functioning to the maximum last second? Is that courage? Would you use the descriptive courage?
I wouldn't use the opposite, which would be cowardice. I would say that perhaps we can't evaluate it as courage when we stand on the side that opposes such beliefs, but it certainly is determination, and it certainly is an individual defense of one's own beliefs, even in the face of tyranny. No one wants to hear tyranny described when you're defending Nazis. You don't want to call it that, but it's the same argument. It's the same point.
I want to hear, Jacob, how would you respond? Would you say that courageous soldier?
Now your attention please. Central Library will be closing in 10 minutes. I repeat, Central Library will be closing in 10 minutes.
You have something to say? You want to?
I was just saying, you really got to wrap up.
Okay.
Quickly, I think that the difference, no, I wouldn't call a Nazi guard courageous in that circumstance, but again, it comes back to where the stakes are. So with the Nazi guard, it suggests to be a kind of mania or a pathology or something. With a cartoonist, who's not trying to physically inflict harm on anybody and who's drawing something, despite the consequences of those symbolic renderings, I think that you know, I don't know, it feels a little bit apples to oranges to me, but
Maybe, and we're gonna think about it during the week, and we'll pick it up in the next class.